Well, just other than treating the allergies, yeah. But if you've done your best to treat the allergies, then still, I guess if the obstruction was bad enough, you might still wind up on CPAP or BiPAP. If you were otherwise unable to treat the allergies to the extent that you could clear up that obstructive problem at night.
What role, if any, does light therapy have?
Good question. The role of light therapy. Light therapy is tied in with the whole melatonin cycle. The presence of light essentially deactivates melatonin. So light entrainment, it can be an effective way for some people to help regulate their sleep-wake cycle. You want to talk to people that have bad sleep, talk to people that are at the poles. People up in the North Pole or people down in Antarctica. Wow, great way to mess up your sleep cycle. Astronauts. NASA is very interested in medicines that help with wakefulness and help with sleep because nothing messes up your circadian rhythms like having a sunrise every 97 minutes as you're flying around the Earth at almost 100,000 miles an hour. So that really messes up. I was doing some lectures down in Houston and got a chance to speak with the flight surgeon for the shuttle missions, and they were talking about this as being a big interest because it really can take a toll on people. It's just like they have no idea, they lose sense of time, and they don't know how long they've been up there. So light therapy can be effective for that. Light therapy is also sometimes effective for depressive disorders, for mood disorders. It's like everything else in the world. It's not magic. People fall out on a bell curve. So for some people it works amazing. For some people it doesn't do a thing. Most people fall somewhere in the middle. And generally what you want to do is you want to have light that approximates sunlight on a bright day, not lights like this. You need about 10,000 lux or 10,000 lumens, ideally given in the morning. Ideally for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour during the day. You don't have to stare at the light, but it does have to be hitting your face.
There's debate on blue spectrum versus...
Yes, some recent data saying that the blue spectrum light may be more effective. There's just one study so far that I'm aware of that's shown that, so I think we're going to need more data, but certainly doesn't seem to be any worse at least. It may be superior. But yeah, I do use that with patients sometimes.
You want to see the results of that. I mean, just here in the Midwest, think about how hard is it to get up in the winter, it's dark, versus how hard is it to get up in the summer when it used to be anyway before the time change. It used to be light. I mean, you'd wake up pretty quick when it was light. Now, and actually, I started getting into that a little bit, and it's so hard to get up when it was dark. I bought this little mechanism that I hook up to my light that you set a little timer. About a half an hour before you're supposed if you want to get up at 6, about 5:30. This thing starts to come on and gradually lifts your light up, and so then it's like somebody flicking the light on, but it's not sudden. It's like the sunrise kind of, but I don't use any special spectrum or anything like that, just the regular thing. And I wake up much more ready to go than I would have before.
Yeah, and sometimes if you move to southern latitudes, it's funny because sometimes if I'm doing lectures in South Florida, in Southern California, in Hawaii, I'll get that question sometimes. It's like, is that seasonal affective disorder stuff really true? Does that really happen? Do people really get more depressed during the winter? It's like, move here for a winter.
Yeah,
and see what staring at gray skies does for you for a year.
Yeah, there's something to all that, I think.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much effect it has on our adolescents too, particularly now with daylight savings time, because we're taking adolescents whose normal circadian rhythm isn't to go to sleep until 12 or 1 or 2, and now we're making them get up an hour earlier.
There are actually some school systems across the country who, in response to this data, have adjusted the school day, and where they say, okay, instead of having school start at 9 o'clock and go till 3, we have school from 10 to 4 now. And actually, some of those school studies have shown improvements on graduation rates, standardized I-STEP equivalent kind of testing, and so forth. So.
It's amazing if you know the science behind how our bodies work and our brains work. It's amazing. If you could actually change society in a way that would match that, it would be so much better. The other example of that is having a nap at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for most people.
Yeah.
A little 15-minute nap, where you're in the middle of your work day. What happens? I'm sitting at my desk today reviewing this document. It's kind of boring, but still, 2 o'clock, and I'm ready to fall asleep. And you can't do that when you're at work, but it'd be nice if you could. And you've seen it on TV. There are companies that are now allowing. They have those little sleep, what do they call them, sleep centers or something in the office somewhere. So
and a good chunk of the world does that. A good chunk of the world does take breaks in the afternoon and extended lunch hours and so forth. So getting us to change our habits to match our biology sometimes is tough.
Right, right. And I think, obviously the nap shouldn't be an hour or 2 hours, but 15 minutes, 20 minutes is just amazing. I don't know, you guys have probably done this before, but you drift off for 15 minutes or so, you wake up and it's like, wow, I feel so much better. And it was just 15 minutes, or 20 minutes. Are there any other questions? I don't want to rush anybody, but I also don't want to have to keep everybody all night either.
Because you got sleeping to do tonight.
That's right. You got to get to bed. That's right.
I think I got a question. I got a curiosity.
Uh-huh.
Went through the sleep test about 3 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
I've been on CPAP for about a week now. And I got kind of interested in this oxygen level type thing. I guess normal is somewhere close to 100. And I run about low 90s on normal. And in the test, I went down to low 80s. And I was wondering how much effect that has on your...
It's a good question. You're right. Most people, if most people that are in generally good health, if you put one of those finger clip things on them and you measure how much oxygen there is in their blood, we typically like to see that 96, 97, 98%. Getting down to the mid-90s, not too bad. Getting down to the low 90s may not be horrible. When you start dropping below that, or if you're dipping into the 80s, that is much lower oxygen than we're normally supposed to have. And remember, oxygen is basically one of the primary sources of energy for all the cells in our body, especially our brain cells. Our brain cells are different than the other cells in our body because they don't store energy. They don't store energy in other ways that the other parts of our body do, and that's why our brain is so sensitive to oxygen deprivation. And so, other parts of your body could go without oxygen for several minutes and not a huge issue. Your brain has about 3 minutes worth of glucose floating around it of sugar to use for energy. So if you deprive the brain of sugar or of oxygen for very long at all, it can be damaging. Less acutely than that, less intensely than that, if every night when you go to bed, you're dropping your oxygen level lower than it's supposed to be, you're starving your brain cells a little bit. So there have been some concerns about people that have chronic low blood oxygen levels may be at increased risk to have changes in their cognition. They may be at increased risk for different forms of dementia, things related to Alzheimer's. It doesn't cause Alzheimer's. It's not the same thing as Alzheimer's, but it can, in the end, give you the same result. And there's actually some evidence that it may increase your vulnerability to Alzheimer's. But the take-home message is chronic oxygen deprivation, even at a moderate level like that, is not good for our brains and can lead to worsening memory function, worsening concentration.
You do understand, what you guys understand what sleep apnea really is. We sort of alluded to the fact that it's the extra weight in the neck, but what's kind of interesting is if what you look for in a family member, for instance, it might be helpful for them to know. What you'd listen for is if you think about it, here's your airway, it's open like this, and when you're awake, everything's fine. As you start to go into deeper stages of sleep, that your muscles become paralyzed on purpose. That's so you don't act out your dreams. Most of us don't. There's a disorder where people do that, but most of us don't act out our dreams. But when we go into this deep stages of sleep, we relax all these muscles. Well, if you got a lot of weight pushing down on your airway, okay, what's going to happen? It's going to start to flatten out, right? And so as it starts to flatten out, what happens? The snoring starts. It gets a little louder. It gets louder. It gets louder. And then all of a sudden, boom, the person stops breathing. And you can, if it's a spouse or somebody that you're sleeping next to or in the same house with, you'll hear that snoring get really, really loud, and then all of a sudden...
It gets really quiet.
Wait, everything's really quiet, I don't hear anything. That's a little scary because they're not breathing at that point. And what happens, just for a few seconds, that happens. And what happens is the brain then says, whoa, hold on, put a stop to that deep stage of sleep. I can't go into deep sleep because I'm not breathing, I'm not getting oxygen. And it's an emergency. You've got to wake up. So what happens is the person then comes, instead of going into the deep stage of sleep, they go boom, right back into a lighter stage of sleep, and boom, that opens back up, and the whole process starts over again. So then as the brain says, okay, but I need my sleep, let me try again. So they start to go down and snore, boom, shuts off, same process again. So that happened to you 80 times in an hour.
Yeah.
That's not good, right? So that's what obstructive sleep apnea is, and the most common form of it is the weight on the neck that's causing it. So.